Welcome, everyone, for the next episode of the Five Heart Podcast. As you can tell, Greg didn't make it tonight. This is Todd Wolverton. I'll be your host this evening. We were joined by, there he is. We are joined this evening by Mr. Corn Nation, the founder, my good old buddy, John Johnston. John, how you doing tonight?
Oh, it's been a great week. Yesterday, I went to a customer site because their servers were down, and I walked into their server room, which is in a warehouse, and the air conditioning had stopped working, and I almost fainted. I'm glad I didn't faint. And they were like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I'm thinking, I don't want you fuckers calling the ambulance because I don't need this shit. You know, it costs $2,000 to get in an ambulance. It does.
Damn. John, your bar for a great week is really low.
It's you know what it's been a great week because we are less than 40 days away from Husker football. I don't know what the number is, but it's getting like closer. 38
as of today. By the time this airs, would it be like
36, 35?
Yeah.
Well, that's good because we are also joined tonight by another one of the founding members of the Five Heart Podcast. He was on a couple of weeks ago. Those of you that have been listeners for some time will recognize Haas Reuter. I can tell you what, when I was listening to the podcast back when Haas was a regular, I really looked forward to listening to his analysis. I can remember those days. I'd wait and hold on to the podcast, and in the morning when I was getting ready to go to work, I'd flip it on and I'd get smarter because of Haas. Haas, welcome back. It's good to see you. Hey, could you take just a couple of minutes? There are some people that have joined us, during the pandemic when there was nothing else to do, that might not know who you are. So if you could just introduce yourself a little bit so that some of our new listeners have an idea of who you are.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the kind words, Todd, as well. And happy to be back. I was one of the original founding members of the Five Heart Podcast after Brian Toll and Greg Mahachko started it. And I took over after Brian unfortunately passed away back in September 2017. But before that, I wrote the weekly breakdown under Mike Riley. We called it Decoding Langsdorff. Once Scott Frost took over, John gave it the name of the Frost Focus. And I did that from 2016 to 2019 so those 4 seasons. And then after that, I finished up at UNO and I was going into graduate school at UNL, and it just wasn't conducive with the podcast and the writing while getting a master's degree. So now I'm back at it after finishing my master's in educational psychology. And I'm looking forward to breaking down Whipple's offense this time. And I think the offense might be what run the damn ball guy is not a fan of.
Well, I'll tell you what, before we jump into that, I thought about this after the last episode that I was with you on, and you've got a master's degree in educational psychology.
Yes, sir.
Took 3 educational psychology classes at the University of Nebraska. And I have to say, while that was really never my gig, I can tell you that I do recall 2 of the 3 professors, and I do recall that I learned a lot. And I thought it was really important, taking some of those things and going into the classroom and being an educator, and have fallen back on some of those lessons over the years. So I think oftentimes that's part of being a teacher that's often overlooked. So it's good to pick your brain on that a little bit.
Wasn't Dr. Tom, didn't he have a doctorate in that?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. So what is it in a nutshell? 25 words or less.
All right, 25 words or less. I feel like I'm on like a pageant or something. Basically, educational psychology, basically what it relates to is how do people learn? Whether it's the cognitive processes of learning, like, short-term, long-term memory encoding, or the environments that they're in, or equipping people with the skills, knowledge, and abilities to be effective in their environment.
Do you think it made Dr. Tom the coach he is?
Absolutely. And I know, like, in the PBS documentaries that they came out with after he retired in like 2001 or 2002, Jack Stark points out that T.O. would always downplay the importance of his doctorate in educational psychology as it related to coaching football. But the more I got into this field, and like I said a couple weeks ago, I'm planning on getting a PhD in it eventually. There were so many things that I'd be, reading about, doing research on, and I realized I'm like, yeah, this made him into the greatest college football coach of all time. I mean, elements of psychology were everywhere, whether it was how he treated the players. He's very authoritative, high expectations, high demands, but high warmth. He wasn't just an authoritarian like some football coaches are, or like in terms of his play calling. It's all behaviorism in the eyes of the defense. It's a 3-term contingency where you give them something as a stimulus and you see their response, and there's a consequence, whether it's they bite on the fullback fake on the belly option where the quarterback pulls it after they ran traffic a couple of times. So it made him into the coach that he was. As modest as we all know T.O. to be, he'll always downplay it. But
we need?
What's that?
You need a doctor name. Kind of like me. Some people have called me the doctor of love throughout my lifetime.
Well,
nobody has ever called me that.
I'll be sure to mention your name and thanks when I finally get my PhD.
Well, we need to Dr. Offense. We'll come up with something.
We will
come up with something. Dr. Oz, I don't think that guy's a doctor. Dr. No. Phil, he's not a fucking doctor. You can be a doctor before.
I learned about Dr. Phil, in grad school, reading about ethics and stuff like that. And I'm like, how the hell does this guy even have a TV show? Like, unethical as hell, in every step of the way. The APA won't even claim him.
Well, we should probably not answer that question and get into that rabbit hole. We should go on.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's kick it off here. And Haas, you made a comment just a few minutes ago that does make the hair stand up on the back of my neck a little bit. Run the damn ball guy is going to be a little bit disappointed, huh?
Yeah.
I'm not 100% run the damn ball guy, but I definitely like the physical part of the running game. And now I'm nervous. So if you've studied Coach Whipple's offense, quite a bit, tell us what Husker fans can look forward to here.
Well, first off, I got to echo what you just said. Like, I'm not 100% run the damn ball guy, but as a former offensive lineman in high school football, I love running the ball. The physicality, down blocks, reach blocks, pulling guards, all that. So that's always going to have a special place in my heart. But in terms of Whipple's offense, it's diverse in the passing game. It reminds me a lot of Purdue under Jeff Brom. A lot of different scheme that they're going to carry into the game to game in order to find the matchup advantage that he wants to find. But in terms of the run game, it's pretty austere. It's very much an outside zone based offense. So they're really looking to either hit the perimeter on the corner on the stretch handoff or cut it back inside downhill. The constraint plays, the complements that they're going to have to the outside zone are really going to depend on defense's alignment. So if they got, a strong side 3 technique defensive tackle, which is increasingly more rare to see in the Big Ten anymore, Iowa doesn't even really run it. They're more of an under front with a weak side 3 technique. You're going to see a lot of influence trap, pull the backside guard to trap the defensive tackle while pulling the front side guard to widen him out a little bit more. And a few counter plays in short yardage, but other than that, it's very much a passing centric offense. And maybe that's just a function of Whipple being a pragmatist and just those were the tools he had on hand at Pittsburgh with, Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison. But maybe it's just a point of, his philosophy in terms of offensive football.
Well, some of us have speculated, and maybe some of us even heard a little bit that, there'll be somewhat of a marriage, if you will, or emerging maybe of some of Scott Frost's philosophies. And we discussed that a couple of weeks ago, where there wasn't really an offensive system under Scott Frost, but, is it feasible that there will be a little bit of an influence from Coach Frost and diversifying that part of the Whipple offense a little bit? can that happen?
That's a good question. I think it definitely could be feasible, especially the conversation that we had 2 weeks ago about the short yardage runs that we were really successful with last season with Chancellor Brewington in motion and, setting the edge on some of the duo or, quarterback G lead type runs. And I would love to see elements of that still in the offense. And I think we'll still see it because it's not like we're transitioning to an offense that's going to be all under center pro style. It's going to be more of a pro style spread offense, shotgun, pistol alignments, whether it's 12 or 21 or 22 personnel. And so I think that that's a natural point to look at. Hey, I think there'd be a marriage between what we're doing already and what we did successfully with what Whipple is bringing in from Pitt. And a big point there would probably be how cohesive can they make the language of the offense? Get everybody on the same page so there's not, communication issues between the offensive coordinator who's bringing his own system, but he's adding in new stuff, and then with players on the field.
Okay, you mentioned pulling and trapping already. Do we have offensive line that can do these things? I mean, wasn't it a couple of years ago I kept asking you about this? We can't pull.
John, why'd you have to bring that up to me? We went an entire season in 2016, and when I charted the entire season retrospect, we pulled linemen 7 times the entire season, and like 5 of them came in the last 4 games once Gerald Frost was healthy. I remember being at the Nebraska-Iowa game that year in Iowa City and seeing us run a counter play with Tanner Farmer pulling and kicking the end, and I about shit a ton of bricks because we hadn't seen it all year long. In terms of this year, I would be much happier if Cam Jurgens was still at center. If we're going to pull, have a lot of movement on the offensive line, because his explosiveness and just how athletic he was able to bury defenders, even though he wasn't typically the strongest guy in the middle there. He was a little undersized in terms of his playing weight before the NFL Combine. But you hope that you have guards that can get out and move. Losing I'm going to butcher his last name. I apologize.
Newely. Noradin Newely.
Losing him really hurts because he was playing some great football by the end of the year. Talk about just an earth mover at 330 pounds. And right guard, that's up in the air because Sichterman was playing really well at the end of last year, but we lost him to graduation. So if we can, the tackles I feel pretty good about in terms of pulling and, trapping.
You mean they can move their feet forward, but they can't take their steps backwards very well?
Yeah, well, hopefully there's at least one of those guys that's not going to be on the field. I'm not going to call him out by name. I think, we all know who it is, but yeah. Let's just say when there was a personnel change last year before an injury, it was a very good thing for that offensive line.
So you didn't actually answer the question. Can we pull?
I hope so. I don't want to be just going out there running outside zone, 25, 30 times a game. And their defender, 3 technique is just spiking upfield. And, we don't have any way to control the ends from, boxing it back in or spilling it to the outside. I hope that we got linemen that can pull so that we can control that defensive front a little bit more.
Let's assume we can for the purposes of the rest of this conversation.
Well, if we can, are we talking like, can they move? But like once they arrive at the block, and get fitted up, they're not effective, or what are we talking here?
Let's just say that for the purposes of the rest of this conversation, we have an offensive line that executes not as well as the pipeline guys, but they execute their plays well enough to, let's say, I don't know, on a run play, get 3 yards a carry, 4 yards a carry.
Okay, so let's say
pass protect for 2.5 seconds.
Let's say like the 2012 offensive line, the year that we won the Legends division and, got buzzsawed by Wisconsin, but let's not remember that because I've tried to just scrub that out of my memory. The offensive line functioned at that level, which is funny looking back on it because I didn't think it was a very good offensive line, and then years go by, and it's like actually they weren't that bad. I think we'd be in pretty good shape. Kind of like the 2019 offensive line wasn't that bad by the end of the year. They were pretty bad at the beginning, but they got better. If they can even play to those levels, I think the offense could potentially be maybe at that 2018 level under Frost's first year. We racked up a lot of yards, racked up a lot of points, whether those were skewed by garbage time or not in a few of those games. I think that would be a good starting point.
So assuming that Nebraska can run the ball a little bit and does run the ball a little bit, you've dug into, the Whipple offense when it was at Pitt. Perhaps you've even dug a little bit further back than that. We know that he, or at least at Pitt, they were a pass heavy offense. As you've analyzed it, as you've looked at it, what's your best prediction of what we're going to see come that Saturday over in Ireland and into the season? What's it going to look like?
One thing that kind of struck me was the Mike Riley offense. I know all of our listeners probably just all groaned right then and there, but the Mike Riley offense during Tommy Armstrong's senior year, the way they were able to blend, running the ball effective enough, they weren't going to light the world on fire. No one was going to confuse that team for the 1995 Nebraska running game. But they ran the ball well enough. They threw a lot of passing concepts out of the shotgun, pro-style spread offense, a lot of bunch sets, a lot of trip sets, motion backs out of the backfield to get them out on the perimeter, hit them on a quick swing pass. I think that's what it's going to look like. And that's one of the things I like about Whipple's offense is his use of motion with the receivers in the passing game to open up, that defender chases the motion, it's man coverage, and it opens up some leverage on the edge, for like a flat route from the running back or a wheel route or a rail route up the boundary. And so using that motion to find that weakness, identify the coverage. I think we'll be doing a lot of that just to get easy throws in space. And that's something that like Purdue excels really well at with all the uses of their motion from their slot receivers, whether it's Rondale Moore or, number 33, white wide receiver. He had an older brother who played for him too. I'm trying to draw a total blank on his name right now. But also in terms of, trips formations, Ohio State does a great job of having an unbalanced passing game where they're going to overload you to one side with trips, and then they're going to isolate the backside receiver in man coverage, or they'll go with a 4x1 or 3x2 set. So I think you'll see us flooding a lot of the coverage zones, and for easy completions, getting guys wide open. One thing that I've noticed with Pitt is, for as talented as Kenny Pickett was, and he was really the straw that stirred the drink for Whipple's offense, a lot of the throws he made were not into tight windows or tightly contested. They were schemed open, in other words. So that's one element of this offense that I am excited for.
So, okay, maybe a dumb question here, but what bogs down this offense? What stops this offense from moving the ball up and down the field?
Are you talking in terms at like Pitt, or what it would mean for this offense? What would stop the offense here?
Let's talk about this offense. So, and I'm going to oversimplify, but, one of the things that concerns me about a pass first offense, and you didn't say that, but if in fact this is a pass first or a heavy passing offense, one of the things that really concerns me is the day the quarterback has an off day. If the quarterback has an off day, that's gonna sabotage the success of the offense. If the quarterback's on, if the quarterback's playing well, what could undermine this offense? What could stop this offense?
One of the things that stands out to me the most would be what we touched upon a little bit earlier. offensive tackles. If they're going up against speed rushers that are coming around the corner, and maybe our interior offensive line's dealing with some interior stunts, that could be a big problem because one, your quarterback's getting heated up, he's being hurried into the throw. But number two, you're looking at your quarterback gets hit, as we've learned over the past few years in Nebraska football. If he gets hit repetitively, he's probably going to end up missing some time. And, having to use a backup quarterback would be one of the things that would bog down this team. But more to the schematic answer to that, Pitt really struggled early on against Tennessee in their I don't know I can't remember if it was the first or second game of the year this year. It might have been the second game. But they really struggled early on, and a lot of it was Tennessee had really physical DBs, and they really, they kind of were playing that kind of that matchup zone like the Pelini defenses used to, where yes, it's zone coverage, but instead just spot dropping to a spot on the field, like John's favorite country, cover three. That discussion from a few years ago, John. They're carrying them through the coverage zones and passing them off to another defender. And as I recall, Pitt got down 10-0 and almost got down 17-0 to Tennessee in that game. And so if we're going to be playing teams with really physical DBs, like in Ohio State, even though they're not on the schedule this year, that could present some problems if the DBs are really dictating the game to the receivers in terms of, what's being allowed, as John with officiating, as you're well aware of.
The arm bar.
Yeah.
I had a question and it went away.
Damn.
Wait a minute. If you go back and look at, I think particularly last year, Scott Frost had this habit, or whoever was calling plays, of putting Adrian Martinez in the position where his offensive line sucked at pass protection, but he never had a chuck down guy.
No.
Am I wrong about that?
No, you're not, because so many times we'd have to keep a back in or keep an H back in or keep the tight end in, 6, 7, 8-man protections just to have a shot at getting something off to, like Toure or Betts or Omar Manning or what's his name, Oliver Martin. So that was a big problem. And also, defenses are evolving to the point where they may have been blitzing the back. If the back stays into block for a second before releasing, they'll drop off into coverage. But if, he releases the blitz. So that could have been that situation as well.
So what do you see out of Whipple's offense to combat that kind of situation? If your let's say our offensive line is not, they're poor at pass protection, what are they going to be able to do to offset that?
I think you'll see a lot of screens. What bubble screens. I know he's a big fan of the jailbreak screen to the boundary. It might be his version of the short side option. So we should all buckle up. And we all know how much this fan base loves bubble screens and swing passes in general.
As long, if you can get the ball there quick, I'm fine with it.
I fell in love with those plays when I watched UCLA torch us with them in 2012 with Jonathan Franklin. I was like, damn, that's a nice concept. After I got over the sting of the loss, I realized what great plays they were. But then when we start trying to run them, they just don't work.
Well, it helps if you don't step back, look for a second, and then bring your arm up.
And your quarterback's not jumping to grab the snap way up in the
air. Yeah.
It's always important. Other parts of the offense, it's not ultra reliant on RPOs. He'll run some, but it's not like in the modern college game now where, teams like Ole Miss, every play is an RPO basically. He uses them in certain situations. Oftentimes around the red zone, you put one defender in conflict, whether it's a nickel back or a weak side linebacker, taking them and making them choose whether they're in the run fit or out of the run fit based on their what read they're getting. But it's not ultra reliant. Maybe that changes because Frost's offense, historically speaking, has been pretty heavy on RPOs. So it'll be interesting to see, another point, like Todd mentioned, what different concepts and philosophies are married together with bringing Whipple on board.
Well, last year we saw a triple option where one of the receivers was like the third option.
Oh, I love those plays. Yeah, we got those from Coastal Carolina.
Right. Whipple seems to play in that more with the motion can be used to move stuff around and I guess set up matchups that the defense isn't ready for.
Yeah, I could some of that motion, like you mentioned, I could see that being used, but maybe not on the option. Maybe bringing a receiver around in that orbit motion and having an option just to hand off to the running back or just swing it out wide. Kind of like what Steve Sarkisian liked to do at Alabama in 2020. They had, Devontae Smith and Henry Ruggs and all those really good receivers, Jalen Waddle.
Yeah, I have my doubts that we're going to see any option.
Yeah. Unless Logan Smothers wins the job.
There's your package guy. John always brings up the Minnesota situation, and
I don't know why you wouldn't do that, honestly.
Kid can run it. Can run it. He showed that against Iowa. So.
Oh God, it's like crouch speed hitting the corner on the option.
Although the reason that you wouldn't run it is because Scott Frost has to win this year. He has to win. And here's the thing. How much of this offense can you learn by the time the first game rolls around? I mean,
it should be ideally, if it's taught the right way, in install meetings, ideally you should have it all the way learned because, he's been here. I can't remember if he coached the Peach Bowl or not. That's one game against Michigan State, which actually would be a great game to watch since it's against a Big Ten defense. But I can't remember if Whipple was calling plays against Michigan State in the Peach Bowl or if he had already left for Nebraska. I had COVID during that time period, so I remember watching that game with a lot of dextromethorphan in my system from cough medicine.
Well,
so I basically don't remember watching that game.
Read some interviews with some of the quarterbacks, and the quarterbacks, have stressed that Whipple's expectation is that they'll know the playbook, they'll understand all aspects of each play as well as he does. And you kind of reading between the lines, I think that there's been, a pretty heavy emphasis, a lot of work with, the dynamics of that offense with the quarterbacks. And there has to be. I kind of made a flippant comment back before spring that, the spring practices last year, it couldn't be the time, the focus couldn't be on looking at, a number of players and seeing what each one brings to the table. In my opinion, last spring, they had to start implementing offense as much as they possibly could. And, so it doesn't sound to me like it's a complicated offense, but it sounds to me like there's a lot of options, not the option play, but there's a lot of options, designed into some of the plays and some of the concepts.
You brought up a great point what you mentioned about spring football, where it's such an emphasis on the install of it that first spring, and not so much on what you have in terms of personnel. That by the time we get into the season, it might take a few games for it to shake out on what personnel is on the field, what's our bread and butter, who does what really well. Because at this point, even 36 days out from the game in Ireland, we might still be trying to figure out, the fine details of the offense, installing those. So it's going to be very interesting to keep an eye on that because, one, you got a ton of newcomers who are unproven commodities. And then two, everybody's kind of unproven because they're all learning the offense from the same spot. They're all starting from, square one.
As long as they're not videotaping the practices,
only we would be dumb enough to videotape cheating.
Well, that kind of gives me a little opener here. When you talk about the whole off-season stuff, videotaping practices, I put this on Slack the other day, and I just shake my head. All of us are such big Iowa Hawkeye fans. but this is true. This really happened. On Monday, apparently, they are hosting half of the Iowa State high school baseball tournament at Dwayne Banks Field in Iowa City. In Iowa, they did it years ago, and then they played all the games in Des Moines at Principal Park. And now the last couple of years, they've split it again. So 2 classes are playing in Iowa City and 2 classes play up in Carroll. Long story short, Dwayne Banks Field on the campus at the University of Iowa runs right alongside the outdoor practice fields. And they were making public address comments during the baseball games, canned statements, telling the fans not to watch what was going on the football practice fields. Now, I'm sure they had a bunch of, kind of official sounding language, but they're telling these high school baseball fans, don't turn around and watch what's going on the other side of that fence. Iowa maybe has a trick play. Are you kidding me? It's just.
Tracks in the quick kick on 4th down. God, I had no idea. I should have looked at the Slack chat room because I would have loved to have chimed in on this conversation. Do you think that they realized if they just wouldn't have said anything, not drawn any attention to it, it would have been fine?
I think they would have been.
Nice job, Kirk Ferentz.
Well, maybe this is their way of throwing people off that the offense is going to be different this year when it's been the same for
what, they come out running the Mike Leach air raid?
Yeah. For the first quarters of every game.
Yeah.
With whatever quarterback they get, I really want to ask, why has Kirk Ferentz been there 20 years and they still can never draft a decent quarterback? Maybe I brought that up before. We should stay on Nebraska.
I think he's just content to line up with 2 tight ends, a fullback, a good running back, and have a quarterback who just doesn't screw it up.
Well, that's probably a good point.
And honestly, as much as I used to clown on them for that, and I've been humbled a lot because we've lost to them for the past 7 years, I've realized I'm like, nothing that they do is sexy or cool. I was like, It's effective. Like it's like putting on a pair of work boots. Like, yeah, they're going to keep your feet safe. They're going to keep your feet warm. Nothing to look at. That's it.
You're only going to score 3 points against Michigan in the Big Ten title game, but whatever.
I watched that game at a bar over in Council Bluffs with one of my friends who's a Husker fan and another friend who's an Iowa fan. And I thought it was going to be full of Iowa fans. It was mainly full of Nebraska fans who showed up to watch Iowa get their ass kicked. So it was beautiful being in there that night.
And I hate to say this, but somebody pointed out to me when I was listening to some talk radio the other day, one of the things that Iowa has done very well in the last few years that Nebraska has shown they can't do, and that's win close games. Mm-hmm. And, perhaps, that conservative, low risk kind of philosophy that he has, plays into that a little bit. But
sometimes I think might have been John Bishop on Big Red Overreaction after we lost to Iowa this year. He said, sometimes you don't have to go win a game. Sometimes you just have to wait for the other guy to lose it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
And we've handed them, I'd say under Frost, 2018 is the only year that Iowa straight up beat us. When they had Noah Fant and TJ Hawkinson, we still played them to last second field goal. That was the year where it's like, yeah, we were right there, but they had control of that game. But 19, 20, 21, talk about, they really didn't win it. We just lost it for ourselves.
Yep. No, that has to, there's a lot to say about mindset and knowing how to win. Taking care of business, knowing how to close out, and hopefully with, some of the new additions to the coaching staff this year, there can be that kind of a shift in the mindset. This team has to learn how to win football games.
Did you see the news this week about the media having limited access to this? What do you think of that, Haas?
You remember last year after we lost to Illinois when Frost said they came out in a front that we didn't game plan for, and then Lubick's sitting there going, no, we had the plays on the play sheet. It's a bunker mentality. That's what I think.
That was the specific example I thought of. That was the very first thing I thought of, because he said we had to throw away half our plays, and Lubick said something to the effect of, that's kind of a normal occurrence when a team comes out. And
like, I was no fan of Matt Lubick. I didn't think he was a very good coach or recruiter, but I mean, he's been around the game for a long time. His dad was Sonny Lubick, who coached at Colorado State. I mean, he knows what he's talking about. I mean, just from studying the game, studying tape, I also know that that's a common occurrence. Oh, they came out in the front, you weren't prepared for it. Okay, let's rely on our rules, the blocking rules. Are you covered or uncovered? Where is he at? Is he backside shade, head up, play side shade? Communicate with the offensive lineman. You can troubleshoot these things on the fly. But instead, you get this he said, she said kind of thing. And so that was my first thought when that news came out. And beyond that, I was really disappointed, because I really enjoyed the interviews with the assistant position coaches, because oftentimes coordinators and head coaches have such a global view of things that their answers are vague. Whereas in a position coach, let's say we have a run play that's blown up on 4th down. Hey, the right guard, stepped the wrong way, or he didn't make a call at the line of scrimmage on who he was going to take, in the blocking scheme. So I like to hear those fine details. So I'm a little disappointed by that.
I have two more questions on that.
Okay.
Or points. Do you think that this is Trev Albert's method of making Frost more of a CEO as a head coach? And imprinting in his head, you have to be as CEO and let these guys do their jobs? Because I think my biggest fear is Frost is going to go into this game with Northwestern, and in the first quarter is going to be called by Mark Whipple, and then Scott Frost is going to go, I'm going to go call the plays, and he sucks. He honestly is not good.
Yeah, kind of a little, we saw Pelini be a little reactionary with his offensive coordinators. Capital One Bowl against South Carolina comes to mind. I could see that being a play by Trev to make him into more of a CEO, being the united front to the media, presenting the message of the program, not having so many different voices, saying a few different things. I mean, remember the debacle with Bob Diaco at the tail end of 2017? I mean, good Lord. I still remember some of those.
That guy would have,
because they were so absurd.
He would have had a decent career if he didn't have to actually talk to people.
Yeah. I mean, if he just went and did his job, called some defense, coordinated some defense, great. But instead, my favorite one still to this day is does a 2-year-old get mad when they can't lift the coffee table? No, because they're 2. They don't know how. Which, in his defense, he's actually more correct from a psychological perspective than he may have been aware of. I don't know what his field of study was, but he was talking about self-efficacy, but the fact that he was just so weird did not help matters. I mean, that one of the weirdest interviews I've ever seen.
The second point I'm going to make is way more conspiratorial.
All right.
When Mickey Joseph speaks, I am more interested in hearing what Mickey Joseph has to say than anybody else on that football team at this point in time.
Oh, dude,
you think that this is a move to actually limit Mickey Joseph's rising influence?
I could see that. Let's just let's get a little bit more conspiratorial here. I'll join you on this one. Nebraska football has been an absolute soap opera for the past 20 years. It's an all-male soap opera. There's no other way to put it. It wouldn't shock me if that was a way to suppress his rising star, put a muzzle on him so he can't, get out in front of the media. Kind of remember how popular Bo was in 2003 as defensive coordinator under Solich. But I mean, there's some people I've talked to, not like insiders. I'm just talking about friends who, they've talked about, hey, if Frost gets fired, at some point in the season, do you think Mickey Joseph would be the interim? And do you think he'd get promoted full time? And I mean, we're Nebraska. I think we can do better than that, barring him going 7-0 down the stretch and we win the Big Ten West and go play for the Big Ten championship. But I don't know. That is a good point, John. I like the fact that that you're the conspiratorial type on here.
You know what,
Yeah.
John? You've missed it. You already answered this question months ago. If Scott Frost is truly going to run this program like a CEO, then the person who's going to stand up and talk to the media is his spokesperson. Scott, they need to hire a spokesperson, somebody
Yeah,
who
they do.
can actually say things without throwing everybody else under the bus. You know, a trained professional. A trained
press secretary.
Jen Psaki is available right now. You know,
Ari
somebody-
Fleischer.
DJ Craig from the West
Yeah.
Wing.
Yeah, I mean, don't put any of those coaches up there. Put the spokesperson up there and let them respond to all the questions from the media.
We cannot confirm nor deny there was an assistant Iowa coach in the stands clapping that threw our game off.
Oh God, I forgot about that one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Todd, you were going to say something before I interrupted
No,
you.
I was just going to be stupid and make the comment about the spokesperson. So
I like it. Honestly, I'm surprised Nick Saban hasn't gone that route.
isn't that the truth?
Because he runs it like he's the president there, basically. Got
Yeah.
a whole cabinet.
Well, I'll tell you what, the most entertaining thing that I saw this week relative to college football or whatever was part of Mike Leach's interview down at the SEC Media Days, where he was talking about neckties and how neckties absolutely serve no purpose. And then some kind of a comment about, he'd even referenced the guy who invented the current necktie. And he made some kind of a comment that when they finally invent the time machine, that guy better find a way to get lost because people are going to come after his ass.
I agree 100%. I hate wearing a tie.
Yeah, I haven't worn a tie for probably 15 years.
When I was student teaching, all my male classmates, they would wear a tie, shirt and tie, student teach. I'd show up polo, a sweater, a quarter zip, anything but a tie. Went out of my way to not wear one.
3 days next week. I'm going to try like hell to figure out an option, but
You could
I
do
don't
the
know.
cowboy tie thing.
The bolo.
There you
Yeah,
go.
what did they call those?
Bolo tie. Yeah.
Every time I wear a tie, I just feel like I'm being slowly strangled by a very weak person, Just right there. I'm in a wedding in early August as a groomsman. And at first I thought it was just shirt and slacks. And then as we were getting at the tailor, Men's Warehouse getting fitted and all that, it was like shirt, slacks, and tie. And I was like, shit, I was almost out of the woods on this one.
Well, do we
I go
have
the Ric
anything else?
Flair look, the sport coat, just a collared shirt, no tie.
There you go.
Anything else on Mark Whipple and the offense?
I will be interested to see how he attacks Iowa's nickel 4-2-5 Raider package that they run almost exclusively against us. They run a lot against like Ohio State, but they played Ohio State like once in the past decade in 2017. So can't really use that as a sample size, but they run that package almost exclusively against Frost's offense historically. With Whipple's offense being very pass happy, I envision that we'll probably see it from them again this year. What is Phil Parker at Iowa going to do? Because he, as much as I hate Iowa, he's kind of like a Mike Hankwitz type of defensive coordinator. He always has something clever, some play call at the perfect time, some front, some adjustment. What's he going to do against Whipple's offense? And what is Whipple going to do to counter that? Because Ramir Johnson moving to that slot receiver, kind of Marshall Falk type role in this offense. Great idea to match him up against Big Ten outside linebackers. But then I also have to think like Jim Leonard at Wisconsin and Phil Parker, they're not, and Joe Rossi at Minnesota, they're not dumb guys. They'll find a way to try to counter it. So I'm going to be really excited to see Whipple in the chess match against Big Ten defensive coordinators because there's a lot of damn good ones in this league.
Okay, Northwestern. They always suck us into a rock fight.
Yep, and that's the thing. They always get us into a rock fight, and their DBs will mug our receivers off the line of scrimmage. It's kind of like almost like an NFL game in that regard. I mean, like not anymore, but like when the Patriots beat the Rams in the Super Bowl back in 2001, they just mugged the Rams receivers off the line of scrimmage. That'll be a good test. It'd be an even better test if Hankwitz is still coordinating their defense. But I'm sure that whoever it is that I'm drawing a blank on the name now. O'Neal. I'm sure that, Northwestern will be coached up because, I mean, this is their bounce back year.
I would venture to say that Northwestern, knowing that we have a new offense in place, they're going to throw a lot of different things at our offense. And I think that, and like you said, they're going to play really, really physical on the edges just to see what they can establish and get under our skin would be my guess. And then where does it go from there would be what's going to be interesting to watch, I think.
Yeah, good. You brought up a great point there, Todd, with, they're going to see what they can establish against us. They're probably going to throw out some junk fronts against us, just defensive linemen align different ways to throw off our blocking scheme. They're probably going to really want to test, hey, how well have these guys learned this new offense? Because if you can exploit somebody just from alignment and assignment, oh, you'll take that every time. That's just taking cheap, easy points, basically.
Do we expect to see many draws at all?
Draw plays?
Draws, yeah.
Yeah, at Pitt, they ran a sprint draw where Pickett would start rolling out and then just, put the ball right out in front of him to the tailback coming the other direction. So, and sprint draws, I like that play. The traditional tailback draw, not a huge fan of it.
Quarterback runs.
Not too much. Pickett took off on that scramble against Wake that led to the fake slide being outlawed by the NCAA, which was awesome, but that was just not a broken play. It wasn't a designed run. Maybe you'll see, you'll see the quarterback sneak in certain situations, obviously, and maybe you'll see a bootleg, and then, you never know with Frost's influence and, mobile quarterbacks historically here under him. I think you could maybe see that make its way into the offense. But Whipple himself, I'm not real sure that he's ever been keen on a running quarterback. Or when you're asking a guy to throw the ball 40, 50 times a game at times, you don't want to risk running him because they had to bring in their backup against Michigan State because Pickett sat out of the Peach Bowl. And then the backup gets hurt. So they're on their third string quarterback. And so, look how quickly things can go downhill. Just like when we saw Riker 5 start against Purdue and on Halloween in 2015.
You bring that up. Quarterbacks then. Quarterbacks. Before anybody thinks about that Purdue game. Have you watched anything, or should that be a separate show?
I think that could be a separate show in and of itself right there.
All right, then we'll leave that alone for now. I don't know, Todd, what else do we have?
It's been kind of a quiet week. Not a whole lot going on, I guess. Looking at other Husker sports, people that listen to this show know that we have a bias towards baseball. And unfortunately, well, I guess it depends on how you look at it. Fortunately, unfortunately, there were no Nebraska current roster players nor any recruits that were picked in this year's draft. So what's left, I guess, and that's kind of indicative of the season that we saw. So apparently the two remaining questions from a baseball perspective is whether Griffin Everett and Shea Shanneman will be back. They both got a COVID year. There were people that thought that they would get drafted. They still have an opportunity to sign free agent contracts. But everything else has been pretty quiet. There's not a whole lot going on. So it's that time of year. Yes, John.
I have one more question. I believe we just passed Trev Albert's first full year as Nebraska's athletic director. Is that correct?
I think last year at this time.
When he was hired, I did a YouTube video that was really scathing and said, why in the hell didn't they go outside the program? But really, looking back on it, I think it was misdirected anger. And at the time, if you remember right, they had to announce this right away because the fucking athletic department couldn't keep their mouths shut about anything. They leaked everything. And that pissed me off a lot. And I took that out on this is a bad hire. How do you guys feel about his first year on the job?
I think he's done for stepping in, a month before football season started. I think he's done a nice job. I think it was a creative way, to give Frost a little bit of a longer leash to maybe turn things around. He extended the same grace to Hoiberg, to try to help him, turn things around. And I'll be the first to admit I'm a little biased as a University of Nebraska Omaha alum. I saw what he did to build the UNO athletic department during my 4 years there as a student. And I mean, it went from kind of being a niche cottage industry kind of athletic department to, by the end of my time there, it felt kind of like a, not a big time school, but, at least like a mid-major school, even though they're a low major. So I think he's done a great job. I think he's the guy that's going to, get this athletic department back to being functional and not just an absolute dysfunctional mess.
I think when you say something like that, you should cross yourself.
No shit.
He's the guy.
Looking back on it's been a year since he got hired. It's almost hard to believe it's only been a year because it's been so much drama from that AD over. I mean, he takes over. Well, Moose gets fired. He takes over. Before Moose got fired, there was the whole Nebraska-Oklahoma trying to get out of the Oklahoma game, and then trying to get out of playing a game in Ireland again. And then, Frost gets popped by the NCAA, and then the season starts, and then, we're losing games. Frost going to be fired. So it's like, holy shit. Like, how that guy Trev was probably thinking, like, what the hell did I walk into when he took that job?
John, I resent you asking us for our opinions on this because if you recall, I made the promise that I was not going to say a negative thing about Scott Frost during the month of February, and I didn't. And now, 1 year into the administration of Trev Alberts, you're asking me what I think of Trev Alberts. And I made it very, very clear well over a year ago what I think about Trev Alberts.
Yeah.
And so what saddens me is that UNO still doesn't have a wrestling program.
That does sadden me too.
But I can't say anything good about Trev Alberts, but I wouldn't fire him. How's that?
That's not bad. I know that your heart rate is very high right now. The moment I said, you went in the back of your head, you went, that fucking prick. Why did you ask that?
Wow. I mean, look at all the red behind me is stuck to the wall. My head blew apart.
Yeah. No, the football decision, when I started going to UNO, I remember thinking like, damn, wanting to get into college football, coaching college football would be so easy if they just had a football program. Thanks a lot, Trev Alberts, And then, I saw the other things they did for the campus. And so by the time I got done at UNO, I flipped my opinion on Trev Alberts. But there was a time that it was just like, I'd walk by Caniglia Field every morning on my way into class. I'd see it as a soccer pitch. And it would basically just be like, God damn it, that shouldn't be a soccer pitch. That should be a football field.
Exactly. What he has brought to the university is professionalism, and he's brought organization, and he has brought people on board, I believe, with a vision. And he's doing that without breaking the bank. And in fact, he's been very mindful of finances. He walked into it, it seemed like for a while, we just kept uncovering mess after mess after mess. And I don't think anybody truly understood how bad it had gotten under Bill Moose. So you have to give the guy some credit there. And he has, in his first year, he's the best athletic director we've had since Bill Byrne. I'll just leave it that way. So
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I think he's been fairly forthcoming and honest about the contracts for Frost and Hoiberg that were just set up to, like, I don't know, like we were going to print our own money, I guess. Without any performance requirements in them or anything. So I don't know. I guess, I guess for the first year, I did another video about how this was the worst year in Nebraska school history with regards to sports. I mean, if you put the women in there, yes, the women obviously perform very well, but for the three major men's sports, I don't think we possibly couldn't have been worse. But,
no, it doesn't get much worse than what we put forth this year.
absolutely.
So his second year will be determining who gets to stay and who gets to go and where we go from here. So I guess, I don't know if it matters if you have a Nebraska guy. I'm getting less and less concerned about that as we go on. It'd be more like, can we hire a Merc? Can we
I just want the best in here? Job.
Yeah.
That's all I care about anymore.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think there are people that will, no matter what happens with Frost, they'll still defend him to the death. So
Yeah.
I don't get that mentality myself, but whatever.
Maybe I'll just become like the Husker hipster and defend Bill Callahan to the death. He should have never been fired.
Not sure how
Good
popular
recruit. I'll give him that.
So, well, I'll tell you what, it's time to wrap it up, fellas.
Sounds good.
Time. Yeah. Well, we thank everybody for joining us this evening. We look forward to having Haas back, to break down things a little bit further over the course of the next few weeks prior to the start of the season. Haas, it's nice to have you back and sharing your wisdom. John, as always, it's good to see you alive. I appreciate that. And, we'll bump into each other, I'm sure, here in the near future. So anyway, for John Johnson, for Haas Reuter, this is Todd Wolverton reminding you that 5 hearts are all the hearts you need. And I didn't do it as good as Greg does. John?
You still got it right. Go Big Red.
Win the damn off season.
There you go.